Okay, good evening and welcome to tonight's show. This is episode 10 of They Call Me Coach. Tonight we're joined by Gosport and Hampshire-based coach Lee Ryan. Good evening, Lee. How are you?
Evening, CJ. I'm good. How are you?
Well, we've already started with a hiccup because my teleprompter that tells me what I'm supposed to say has decided it doesn't want to work. But that's fine. Lee and I, we go back a long way. You know, we've known each other for, I think it's over 15 years. I was trying to calculate it today. We started together as community coaches working out at Gosport. You know, we got some kids involved in the game quite early on, some of which are still playing. Earlier on in the year, before everything kind of blew up, I bumped into Lauren Milligan on the side of a court coaching a game. I was so surprised because I'd actually gone to that game expecting that you were going to be coaching, and then Lauren was there instead. And yeah, so you know, when we go back and we look at the people that we've helped to develop a love and a passion for the game, it's really nice to see that kind of come in full circle. Watching one of the kids that we coached when she was about kind of 10 or 11 now coaching other kids, which is so super inspiring. As I mentioned kind of pre-show as well, we've done more than coach together. Like we've drank, we've partied, we used to have a dancing jacket, right? Like used to come out most weekends.
Epic dance.
I don't know where mine's gone. You might still have yours.
I got a few lined up in the wardrobe.
You know, I wanted to start tonight's show. It's a little bit different, only because like Lee and I would describe us at one point as brothers, and you know we were growing as coaches, taking a pretty similar trajectory. Both coach juniors, and I'm not going to talk too much because I want Lee to tell his own story. But this, over this period, over this 10 weeks, 10 or 12 weeks that we've had because of the pandemic, it's given some of us or a lot of us time for reflection. And one of my reflections today as I was kind of writing the questions for tonight's show is that at any given point in your life you have a relatively small circle of people that you respect, that you love, that influence you in lots of different ways. And if I think back to those 15 years, there was a point where, Lee, you were very much part of that kind of tight circle for me. And, I could refer to Michael and Esther and all the people that we kind of got involved in the Solent Sons, kind of when it was back at the Solent Sons. And at those given moments in time, you kind of assume that that's going to be your circle for a long time. And for lots of different reasons, different kind of life priorities, different changes, that circle does change over time. And but I wanted to say it kind of publicly that although over time our circle has changed and there are new people in my life that kind of really influence me on a daily basis. Now I've got 2 daughters, which 15 years ago, if you and I had been having a conversation, I don't think either of us would have ever thought that was going to happen. And I know for lots of different reasons, like, I can be really honest, Lee and I have often agreed on lots of things, and we've talked about basketball and we've talked about life and philosophy, and we've disagreed about lots of things as well. And I think it's really important when you get these opportunities to reflect, as we've all been doing, that you kind of pay your respects to the people who used to be a really important part of your circle. And you were that for me. I think, we were always very competitive, and I like to think that pushed both of us at a particular point in our kind of careers. And even now, when you invite me to your tournaments, I'm desperate to get a win over you. It hasn't happened in the last few years, and potentially we'll see what happens this year. But I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciate you, and like wherever we are, however we've drifted apart or we're not in the same kind of area code, that I'm always going to be there for you, and I'm always going to be looking out for you and thinking about you. I really appreciate you coming on tonight, and with that as a lead into our show, I would love it if you could just share a little bit of your basketball journey, we do this every week because not everybody knows kind of where you've come from, or the kind of trajectory that you've taken. So if you could try and summarize kind of your journey into basketball, into coaching, and and we'll take it from there.
Wow, what an intro. Thanks, dude. I mean, you know how important you are to me as well. And we'll kind of touch on how our circles came together and how important you are to me and all those things too. And yeah, there's been some changes, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about that because I feel like those circles might have drifted away for a little while, but there's no reason why they're not going to come back. And I definitely feel like that's kind of on the cards. And you talked about this period of reflection, and that's definitely a lot of things that I've been thinking about during this time. So I'm sure we'll get onto that a little bit later. But yeah, thanks for that intro, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. So coaching got started very early for me. I had probably like a very challenging upbringing. Moved a lot. Lots of changing of schools, changing of situations, life. Didn't have any male role models in my life when I was growing up, which was tough. And then when I found myself at kind of senior school, I was already a sporty kid, played multiple sports at a reasonable level, and it was there that I met a group of PE teachers that really kind of were my first influence, my first kind of male role model, male influence, and just happened to be within the world of sport. And that was obviously when we landed in Gosport and ended up staying there through my kind of senior education. And we had a PE teacher called Alan Boniface, who happened to be a commissioner for BE at the time. And even though there was no club opportunity, our school really invested in basketball. And I think that's kind of where the love for the game started for me. And it was those kind of role models that really pushed that on to thinking about it becoming a career. So you're probably looking at 12, 13 years old that I was already kind of dipping my toe into the world of coaching whilst playing. And I had aspirations to be a pro player in any sport that I could do. I was trying them all to get it done. And it didn't happen. Didn't have enough God-given talent, opportunity, all of those sort of things didn't fall in line. But actually, when you look back and you reflect, all of that period of trying that, what I was actually doing was honing my skills to become a coach. So it was very early on that I made a decision that I wanted to coach, but I didn't just want to coach, I wanted to coach performance. I've always been interested in competition, in challenge. Failure is kind of akin to my life. I've had a lot of failure all the way through, but they've always just been a challenge to come over, a learning opportunity. And I think that's kind of when I realized through senior school, through playing, that my gift was actually the ability to learn, the ability to take information and then relay that to other people and help them. So I was coaching athletics, I was coaching sprinting, I was coaching some basketball whilst playing at the same time. And at the time, everyone was saying you need to be a PE teacher, because that was the sporty job that existed. We're going back away now, there was no professional pathway in coaching. But it's not what I wanted to do, because for every me that I want to be a PE teacher for, we know there's 2 or 3 others that don't have a desire to be there, or they want to just be there for fun, which is fine for them, but that's not something I want to be put in front of and be made to have to coach. So ridiculous amount of respect for teachers. I mean, it's crazy. I could never do it based on my personality, and I see them day in, day out at Oakland's, and a huge amount of respect for those that step into that career and stay in it. So I kind of took a couple of years away from, I didn't step away from coaching, but I stepped away from kind of thinking sport was going to be my future, thinking it was going to be my career. And then the very first coaching degree came online in early 2000. And that's when I jumped on it. I just saw the opportunity and I jumped on it straight away. So I went to Chichester to study coaching in that very first class. And it's just kind of kismet, really, that in that first few weeks there were sign-ups to do coaching courses. And I did a first couple of coaching courses with Mickey Byrne, who everybody down in the South knows Mickey. And at that time, Mickey said, "Oh, this guy's just moved to Gosport, to your area. You should go and meet him." So I just went along to one of the senior schools in the area and walked in, and Michael Ball was there. And he'd just moved down to the area to become partnership development manager. So it's just one of those things that I was patient enough to wait for the opportunity. I didn't settle, and we've had many conversations before. There's very few things I do settle for. So I didn't settle, and I waited for the opportunity, and as soon as it came, I took it. And it wasn't just that I got to do a coaching degree, it's that I met Michael within the same couple of weeks of that happening. And so obviously from there, it was full on. I mean, I'm doing a full-time degree, but I was being a full-time coach at the same time. So obviously we hooked up with you and Linny as well, and then we put together that team out of nothing. We linked it over with Solent. Obviously, under the Guymans had developed a really strong program, but there was no women's opportunity. So together with Michael, we created that women's opportunity, and then the next kind of 5, 6, 7 years were great. I mean, we just, like you said, started in community, which is where most people have to start to earn a little bit of money. Doing that whilst I was studying. I had the opportunity to progress that into an academy. And the academy was an interesting one because it was a tough school, a really tough environment where they're trying to help kids kind of stay on the right path. And I just felt like my journey and the things that I'd done, I could help influence those kids. And I absolutely loved coaching every single one of those groups, the boys and the girls. Still have good relationships with some of those kids now. And it's great to see them go on and have great careers and lives and families and things, and knowing that you're a part of that. So I really enjoyed that period. But even through that whole period, the thing that motivated me the most was the seniors, was working with elite level juniors, ones that wanted to be pushed, ones that wanted to be challenged. And yeah, I just kind of found my niche and thought, well, this is where I want to be. And then during that period, I did a course and then had a relationship with a really great British coach and a coach development guy called Mark Dunning. And Mark became a little bit of a mentor for me. And Mark's the most realist guy that you're ever going to meet. And he just said it to me flat: look, you're not going to become the coach you want to be by just staying in this country, just by learning and staying in the bubble and the world you're in right now. So that really kind of got my cogs turning and got me thinking about what is it I need to do. So I think that's probably the start of the period where I started to branch away from what we had going on down in the south. So those last couple of years that I was down there was the real start of my kind of performance to elite coaching journey, I'd say.
Where does that take you from? Because towards the end of that time, you started to look at working with national teams as well. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, we obviously had success with the women's team that we created down there. In the old Division 1, we had multiple back-to-back Final Fours. Did a good job at juniors, producing players, like you said. And then I started to take some opportunities to get abroad, like Mark said. So I spent a number of years just traveling. I went, jumped on planes, just got in cars, used every opportunity I had to go and challenge myself, and got in front of, lost count, a dozen or more national team programs. I just said, look, I'm an English coach. We're no threat to you, because at that time we're not competing at a high enough level. And as soon as they heard English coach, they were so inviting, and they let me in, and I got to spend some time, weeks at a time, with some phenomenal coaches and some phenomenal programs. And that's kind of what made me fall in love with the idea of what national teams coaching is and how different it is to that club environment that we have in this country. So those last couple of years were me going off trying to figure out what the elite version of this game looks like around the world. And then obviously Michael moved on to start a program at Oaklands from scratch. There was nothing there. And a year later, obviously he brought me up. And at the time, I was looking at some opportunities to go and coach abroad. And I was really torn between, should I go or should I stay and do this opportunity? And anyone knows that Michael knows that he's a visionary and he can sell you anything. And so he sold me this idea of what we could do at Oaklands, and I took it. And I mean, it was interesting because that first kind of period was a step backwards, I would say. So going from the academy that we built up at Solent and playing Division 1 and doing all those sort of things at that time, to go to an environment where there was no teams, no competition, just 7 girls in the first year, no boys, was definitely a step back. So I think at the same time as doing that, I needed a challenge, and that's when national teams kind of dovetailed with it. So I ended up working with the under-17s for a bit, and then spent 6 years working with the under-18s for England. Obviously Michael a couple of years with Len, and then a couple of years as a head coach. So I think that kind of filled that void of needing that performance environment whilst we were building what Oaklands has become now, which obviously, if anyone knows the program, went from those 7 girls to there's over 90 students now involved in the academy. We've got mini kids trained 3 times a week, which is obviously more than a lot of club teams do, and that's 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, and all of our 12s, 14s, 16s, and our development teams, they all train 3-4 times a week, and then obviously it built us towards a position where we grew so much and so big that the competition standard that we were in at the time, which was Division 1 women with our girls team, so a team of 16 and 17-year-olds, and we went undefeated the entire season until we met you guys in the final. And those girls constantly keep going back to me and talk about that game. Gutted that they didn't manage to finish that season undefeated. They won the trophy, they won the league, and then we just had a mare against a really experienced Solent group, which is going to happen when you're kids. But at the same time, that turned into a really good learning experience for that group, many of which obviously played national teams at the same sort of time, which kind of made that decision to stay and build something that's been really worthwhile now, because we've put ourselves in a position where we're actually creating something in the UK that's rare. It doesn't really exist very many places. So yeah, that's kind of that national team journey, why I got into it. Phenomenal 7 years, absolutely loved it, from spending time visiting national team programs and getting in front of coaches. Once I was in the national team, it's part of that experience. Every summer it's a grind, it's really hard work, it's exhausting, but it's unbelievably rewarding. You get to spend time with just a group of tremendous coaches and you make really good connections. Everybody's so open, and even though we're all competing against each other and we've got aspirations to be promoted from Division B or stay in Division A, it's a really good coaching community when you're involved in those national teams. So I loved every single year of it, and I didn't stop the challenge then, because now I was immersed in that environment. I thought, well, how can I get my kicks? How can I move on? How can I push myself as a coach now? So I took a different tact, which was I started to get on a plane and go to the States regularly, and just cold call coaches and say, look, now I'm a national team coach, can I come in and get in front of you? And as soon as you say that, and they've got an idea that they could potentially recruit your players, and they open up, they lay out red carpet. And I had some phenomenal experiences up and down the States, walking into some crazy college programs, and yeah, just unreal. So it's one of those things that I've constantly found myself pursuing performance and pursuing the elite and trying to figure out what it is that makes those programs tick and what's special about those coaches. So yeah, I invested a lot of time in that process.
Excellent. Well, look, I want to take you, I don't know if it's back or forwards, but I want to take you back to the beginning of your journey going into the BBL. So we just talked about the season where you were pretty much unbeaten bar one game. And I think that's the season that you made the jump from Division 1 to WBBL. Is that right?
No, and that's an interesting story, and it kind of fits with our kind of ethos and what we're kind of about at Oaklands, is that so the WBBL and BBL are a franchise league, if people don't know that, so you have to make an application, and it's no promotion or relegation. So we had that season, really successful season. We made the application to go into the franchise, and we were denied in that year. So we were actually turned down at the first attempt. So we had a bunch of girls that were obviously very competitive and needed to get pushed, and that's the reason why we decided to make that jump, because Division 1 wasn't a challenge enough. And so we actually sent 3 girls across to Brixton. So we actually pulled our team from Division 1 after going nearly unbeaten for a season to allow those kids to go and get that taste of playing WBBL. So we sent 3 players down to Steve Veer to go and play at Brixton that year, and we just played at some competitive opportunities around their own age group with the rest. And then obviously we applied the next year, and then we managed to get in.
Okay, so during that transition, I want you to tell me a little bit about the Wolfpack, and in particular the culture that you have been cultivating there, and how, during particularly that early transition into the WBBL, where you know, I think you'll admit you weren't the most competitive team. That wasn't really why you went in there anyway. But it was a tough few years, those early years. So can you just talk a little bit about the Wolfpack, the culture, and how that maybe kind of helped you and the players kind of ride the waves of those first couple of years in the WBBL?
Yeah, I mean, it's an understatement to say we weren't competitive. We didn't win a game in the first year. we did our best.
I was being polite.
It was tough. It was a roller coaster of an experience for those kids, that's for sure. And that's the reality, is we stepped up with that same kind of group, the same group of 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and we only had one senior really starting the program, and then we had one come back at Christmas and joined us in that first year. But it was tough. It was tough for those kids. But I think that the thing about the Wolfpack, and the thing that we talk about all the time, is that we're a performance development program. So we're not about fun and laughs. We're about enjoying competition. We're enjoying challenge. We challenge every single day. We work a lot. We spend a far more time on individual player development and small group work than we do on team practice. Particularly back then. And yeah, it was difficult, but I think the players just embraced it. They were so used to that culture and so used to us preaching it, whether we were playing under 18s or whether we're playing college level, whether it's boys, whether it's girls. We just instilled a mentality that this is about what's going to be in the future for you, whatever that is you want it to be, whether it's going to the States, playing pro, staying in the UK, whatever that goal, aspiration might be, national team obviously. We just constantly push and we constantly challenged, and it's difficult to do that with young people, particularly in modern climate. It's much harder to challenge in the old school kind of way, so you have to do it in different ways now. But they embraced it, and that's the most important thing, is that they went with it and they didn't falter, they didn't take a step backwards, they just kept looking at it as another opportunity to get pushed, another opportunity to challenge themselves. And I think that group in particular, that couple of years, when you watch what they've gone on and done, what amazes me is that any obstacle that they face now in life or in basketball is that they've been able to succeed. They've been able to take an avenue of being successful. And obviously, like, I know you had Steve on, obviously Kyla's a great example of that group, and the challenges that young lady had in the last 12 months, and she's made some brave decisions, and she's going to go on and be super successful in whatever she decides to do.
Excellent.